welcome you back to Longhorn Weekly with head coach Shaka Smart. And please be joined by assistant coach David Cason, who joins us. How far back do you guys go, Shaka?
Not too far. I mean, well, we've known each other for a while. Let's see. I remember one time I ran into David on the road, and he was recruiting a little guy by the name of Jerome Randall. And this kid was out of Chicago, and he couldn't have been more than, 5'6", 5'7". I mean, he was tiny. And it just so happened that a friend of our program, I was at Akron at the time, was Ben Braun, who was at Cal Berkeley. And it came down to Cal Berkeley and Tulsa, where David was, and they were in a dogfight. Tulsa really outworked Cal Berkeley, but the kid ended up going to Cal just because it was in a bigger league and had a heck of a career.
Yeah, had a great career. At Cal Berkeley.
But we go back from just knowing each other, but really haven't had a lot of interaction personally until really going up until last year. I mean, David, we had an opening on our staff. I think it was when Mike Rhodes got the job at Rice, and David worked with another member of our staff named Jeremy Ballard. They worked very, very closely at Tulsa, and he joined our staff at VCU last year, was a huge part of what we did. We were able to win the conference championship, and I'll tell you a quick story about him. He coached the point guards. So we had 4 point guards. One was a walk-on, one was a senior, and then the other two were a freshman and a sophomore. And the senior was an all-league type player, great player. Well, he tore his ACL on January 31st. And kind of like when Cam went down for us, we were like, oh, man, what are we going to do? Except this kid was even almost more significant of a loss because it was for the whole year, ACL, and he was just our spiritual leader. And David did an unbelievable job before that, and then after that with those other 2 point guards, the sophomore and the freshman, helping those guys play the position, helping them learn the position, and those guys ended up really coming through for us in Brooklyn when we won the A-10 conference championship.
David, you do work specifically with the guards, or at least in the position coach. So you work with Isaiah and Javon and Snoop as well. So how, in working with those guys, has it been similar, and how has it been different from some of the other places? We'll talk more about your other stops on the road a little later on, but just how has it been with those guys as opposed to how you've worked with some of the other guys in the past?
Well, with the older guys, Javon and Isaiah, they do a great job of leading. And for me, when you inherit experience in the backcourt, then as a coach, you just coach them on some of the fine points or some of the main points that coach stresses in our offense or our defense. They're actually fun to work with, and it's really neat, the connection and the competitive spirit that they have in practice. It's actually a little bit funny because the young guys, they're not afraid. They don't back down from anyone or any kind of competition, especially Eric and
I should mention Eric, too,
yeah.
in that group there. So they don't back down. And then the older guys, in the case of Isaiah Jr. and Javon Sr., they're not going to back down either. So that adds to that competitive environment you're talking about.
Yes, and Isaiah and Javon have been tremendous in that manner for the young guys. And as you can see in some of the games that we've had, Eric and Kerwin, Snoop, they've been competing at a pretty good level for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we've talked about this, Shaka, in the past, about how you've kind of had your coordinators and your position coach thing, and it may not be the most unheard of thing in college basketball, but it's probably not the most common thing as well, the way that you have your coaches assigned in those specific areas. And I've heard your players say how much they've embraced it, how much they really like that.
Well, we changed a couple years ago. Well, really last year was our first year where we had a specific coach directly in charge of a specific group, and we had 3 of them. In a lot of programs, there's just kind of guards and bigs.
Right.
But what we did is now we have what we call our point guards. That's who DC works with. And then we have our wings, which are a little bit taller perimeter players. And then we have our bigs. So there's 3 different groups. There's 3 different assistants. But what they also have is they have an area of basketball that they oversee and that they focus very, very closely on for scouting purposes and for team improvement purposes. So, for instance, before practice this afternoon, DC and I, along with Jay Lucas and David Harris from our staff, we sat down and we talked about, okay, when we play this game against Texas Tech on Saturday, here's what they're going to do offensively, and here's how we need to counteract that defensively, and then how do we work that into our practice plan. So every day before practice, we sit down and we cover those things.
Toward that end, David, when you would say look at a Texas Tech, and like last night, the Red Raiders win in overtime over Oklahoma State, and it went down to the end. Devontae Williams struggles all through the game and then gets the game-winning shot on the layup. Are you zeroing in when you're watching not only the tape, but if you just happen to catch it live, are you watching the guards in specific because of your specific area that you're dealing with your guy?
Well, I'm really watching the entire offensive package by the opposing team, and just trying to study areas that could hurt us. And there's certain areas within any opponent where they try to affect us, whether it's inside, whether it's driving the basketball,
or Todrick Gocher hitting three-pointer after three-pointer,
or hitting three-pointers. And it's amazing how much the three-point shot can change a game, and how it can get a shooter who has been struggling all game, how one open three can get them going. So we just try to pick up on small tendencies like that with specific players, but then also some of their main actions that they run, because one of the things that we do not want to do is put our kids in a position where they don't know at least something that the opposing team is going to do.
And I imagine it helps also when you're getting ready to face them a second time, having already played them once.
Well, we would love that opportunity to play someone a second time, because you can learn so much from the first tape. And there's so many things that you see and you say, man, on that play, if we could have guarded a little bit different there. And hopefully, with the guys we have and some of the experience we have, we can take advantage of that. And we have some guys with some real basketball intellect. And they can make some adjustments if we just point certain things out to them. But DC does a terrific job, with our guys. As he mentioned, it's a fine line, because we don't want to overload them, and we still want them to be able to go out there and play basketball, which they do really, really well. But we need to give them some of the answers to the test, if at all possible. And I'll give you a short anecdote. We were playing UT Arlington, back in December, and they had a really good team, and I think they had beaten Ohio State and beaten Memphis at the time, and they were running one of their actions. It was in the first half, and our guys did a good job of shutting it down, and I think we knocked the ball out of bounds, and their best player turned to the coaching staff, turned to their bench, and he said, they really got us scouted. They really got us scouted. So, that's our job. But it doesn't matter what we know. We could know it frontwards and backwards. We got to make sure that we can convey that to the guys.
And that they can take it to the floor and execute it.
And so what David does is the night before every game, and then again on the game day, he meets with the guys as part of what we call scouting rotations, where he's showing them an edit of the other team's offense and kind of cementing in their mind the same things that we go over on the court.
Okay. David Cason, our special guest. We'll get more with him and tell you a little bit about his background. Interesting background for DC. We'll do that when Longhorn Weekly, live from Plucker's, the West Campus location, continues in a moment.
Sends it Isaiah again, top of the arc. Whips a pass into the baseline. Holland goes reverse side with a bucket. Pretty move by Isaiah Taylor. A pretty pass from Taylor into Holland for the bucket. Texas up 6, 26-20.
Taylor, that's what it is. He had 9 assists in the ball game, and found DeMarcus Holland for that basket as we walk him back to Longhorn Weekly. And the guy works very, very closely with Isaiah and the other guys in the backcourt there with the guards. David Cason, Longhorn's assistant. It was a nice pass from Isaiah, but that's what does a coach's heart good, right? To see that point guard execute that play to find a guy wide open backdoor to get in a shot.
Yes, I tell you what's neat is talked early on the segment about Isaiah's connection with his team. Most importantly, Isaiah has a tremendous feel in regards to where guys are on the floor. And as a point guard, when the game is going really, really fast, and we like to play fast. But in your mind, as you're playing, if you can slow it down a little bit, then things can come easy. And as a result, Isaiah has been playing really well, finding teammates, finding Connor, getting the basketball into Prince. And I tell you what, I just look back to the West Virginia game that was a couple weeks ago, how he did not make a field goal. And in my mind, he was the best player on the court that evening, and that's one of the reasons why we won the game.
You grew up in Baltimore, right? You were
Yes,
native
sir.
in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, so how does a guy from Baltimore, Maryland find his way to the College of Southern Idaho to begin playing college basketball?
I tell you what, it was one of the first of all, I was not that good of a player coming out of high school, going to
Coaches
college.
always say that about themselves.
Yeah, I was not that good of a player, and I had some high school teammates that went to the College of Southern Idaho. At the time, it sounded really good. When I got there, it was phenomenal. I had a great experience. I grew up a great deal. Played for a great college coach in Fred Trinkle. And then I was fortunate enough to move on to Illinois State University to play for Kevin Stallings, who's now the head coach at Vanderbilt University. And I tell you what, I wouldn't trade my career for anything in the world. I'm so fortunate, so blessed for how things have worked out for me. And went to Illinois State University.
Good basketball in the Valley.
Good basketball, and most importantly, I married an Illinois girl. Extremely fortunate there, and I've made some great friends along the way.
You have had obviously a good relationship with Kevin Stallings there, playing for him at Illinois State, and then working on his staff later at Vanderbilt. So last Saturday must have been unique in terms of the experience for you.
Yeah, it was a little different. You know, I've never been in that situation before where I competed against or coached against my college coach. But you know what, Craig? When the ball gets in the air, a great deal of that stuff goes out the window. It's about helping your team, helping your kids, helping your staff as best as you possibly can to win that ball game.
DC's got a pretty interesting resume in addition to that, and we're talking about a 20-year journey to this point. 3 years as an assistant at Eastern Illinois, and then 1 year under Matt Doherty as a director of basketball operations at Notre Dame. Then you follow Coach Doherty for 3 years in the same role at North Carolina, back into coaching as an assistant for 2 years at TCU, 6 years at Tulsa under Doug Wojcik, and then 3 years under Kevin Stallings at Vanderbilt, which leads into last year and the decision to leave Coach Stallings' staff, your own college coach, to head to VCU and to join Shaka. How difficult a decision was that for you to make that call?
Well, there's one other question I probably need to, or something I need to mention about that is, within all of those moves, my wife is still with me.
Yeah, a good point.
You know, which I'm greatly
because
fortunate.
this is wives' night on the program, as you're going to find out later.
My wife is still with me, so I'm fortunate there. But you know, as a college player at any sport, if you have a great experience with your college coach, then you always have that situation where you want to work for them or work with them, and it was I had a great time working for Coach Stallings. I think he's one of the greatest minds in college basketball. But when this opportunity came with Coach Smart to work at VCU, it was for lack of a better word or phrase, a no-brainer. Coach has done phenomenal. He's a fantastic coach. One of the things that he does really well after now being involved in the program, and I've heard it from afar, is just how connected he is with his guys, how connected his staff is, and as a result, it just translates into wins and great success for his players, for his staff. But it was a bit of a no-brainer, Craig. I mean, I've watched Coach Smart, how his teams compete, how hard they play. They play for each other. They play the right way. And, people just don't want to play against his teams. And it was really neat. For about 30 seconds on Monday, I turned into a fan up in Waco because the the crowd at Baylor got really, really rowdy. And Coach Drew, he was pumping his fans up and getting his fans on. And every now and then, you'll see that side of Coach Smart that comes out of him. Coach just jumped up, and he's getting our bench and our guys excited. And for about 30 seconds, I looked at Coach, and I was like, wow. I was like, wow, Coach is into this. So, I mean, you want to play for a guy like that. You want to work for a guy like that. You want to be a part of something like that. And I'm extremely fortunate, blessed to work for Coach and to be here.
One other thing, I always ask assistant coaches who join me on these shows this question: is it a goal somewhere down the road to be a head coach at say Division I level, or coach college basketball as a head coach somewhere? Is that a goal?
That's a goal. That's a goal of mine. Everyone's path is different. But I will tell you this: one of my goals as an assistant coach was to always work for a good person and always be at a great place. And I think right now I'm living that dream.
Great to have you. Thanks for dropping by.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
David Cason, Longhorns assistant coach. Shaka will rejoin us. We'll get to some fan questions here in the restaurant. But Longhorn Weekly, live from Pluckers, the West Campus location, continues here on the Longhorn Network and the Longhorn IMT Radio Network.